Progress.
I'm going to just get rid of this meeting and being recorded warning. My name is Michelle. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 5th of 2006. I have a sponsor and I have the honor of working with women through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, sharing what has been so freely given to me through the years. And just a real honor. Thank you, Eric, for asking me to speak tonight. I always have such a great place in my heart getting to meet new alcoholics around the world, around the country. It's just cool that our fellowship truly is everywhere. And for that, I am so grateful that there is a solution for me, a dying drunk that walked in through the doors, not in 06, actually quite a bit before that. So we'll rewind back to where it all began. My very first drink was actually at age 4. My mom making beer batter onion rings, and for some reason, she decided to give me a little bit of beer in one of those little medicine cups. And I think that's so apropos because it was my medicine. And I remember taking that little medicine cup full of beer and just throwing it back. And what happened next, didn't realize it at the time, but I experienced the phenomenon of craving that very first drink of alcohol that passed my lips. I begged her for more, and she refused to give me any more, and I threw a knockdown, drag out fit because there was this thing. It was like, I need more of that. And didn't have an explanation for it, but I really think it's interesting that I remember all of the details of that very moment and have very few memories of that time period in my life, but it's very acute. And I didn't have another drink until I was 16. My house was actually fairly dry, fairly free from alcohol because my mother had grown up in an alcoholic home. And we were pretty much an alcohol-free, dry home, except for that one experience that I remember. So I moved to Colorado from Southern Indiana at the age of 16, right in the middle of my sophomore year. And what better way to socially lubricate than meeting a big group of guys and going to play basketball? And they handed me this big old cup with Kahlua in it and told me to take a sip. And I remember that just like the 4-year-old drink. And it was like this sweet nectar of the gods, and just taking a little sip of that. But much like in Bill's story, there was very much the warnings of my people throughout my growing up that alcohol just didn't work with our family, and that I really needed to be careful. And so I was always terrified of what alcohol might do to me. And so I tried as long as I could to stay away, but then have to say that by the time I had been so tightly wound, I'm a just tightly wound around the axle type of gal. And once I was up in Boulder, had lots of people tell me, you know, you really need 2 things, Michelle. You need to get laid and you need to get drunk. And I thought, well, that's not very nice of them to say that. But when I got my first introduction to really free-flowing alcohol and then finally got drunk for the first time, I remember laying there on the couch at this party at the end of the school year and looking up at the fan, and somebody had TP'd the fan, and I was just laying there, and I thought, this is great. I got to do this every chance I get because everybody in this room is fantastic. I don't have a care in the world. And it was like 20 years of just melted away. And the way I always describe the effect produced by alcohol for me is I've always felt like a Lego building, almost like I'm a Lego human, where none of the pieces were quite clicked together. But when alcohol passes my lips and I swallow even the smallest amount of alcohol, it's like all of the pieces clicked together. And that was my experience for a short while. So every chance I got, it was, give me some of that elixir of the gods. Let me have this experience of something that makes me feel connected, makes me feel whole, and makes me feel okay. The problem here is that in a pretty short time, I'm up there in Boulder where alcohol is free flowing. There's a lot of alcohol. And so it is not unusual for kids of my age to be drinking. But I was noticing, I was going to parties and stuff, and people were drinking normally. And they were drinking and then going and playing volleyball, or drinking and going and playing cards. And once I got started, that's all I could think about. And I was single-minded, focused on drinking, and couldn't stop. And I would ask my buddies, I was like, how do you do this? Like, how do you pace yourself? How do you not drink so much that you pass out on New Year's Eve at 3 p.m. and don't miss the last 9 hours of the celebration before the year begins? And I just couldn't figure it out. What was I doing wrong? So lots and lots of experimenting and trying to drink like a lady and not get sick and not pass out and not black out and not lose my shoes and not end up walking home from the bar that I've left everybody. And it was confounding. I couldn't figure out what it was. Everything else about my life I could set my mind to, except around my drinking. And I, from the very beginning, had very little control. And at first it was kind of fun and kind of cool, and friends thought it was really neat. You know, Michelle, the party girl, going to Disco Inferno and always up for a good time, until it stopped being fun for me or anybody else. I walked into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 23 years old. So that was in the mid-90s. And I have a very important place in my recovery for 24-hour hotlines, because that's how I found Alcoholics Anonymous. I was laying in my apartment thinking, there is something really wrong with the way that I drink. And I opened up my yellow pages. This really dates that experience. And just started down the A's, looking for the word alcohol, treatment from alcohol, something about alcohol. And I found Alcoholics Anonymous in a little bit bigger font and all in caps, and this number that I called. And a nice lady answered the phone, and she said, "Oh, honey, there's a meeting starting in about 15 minutes right down the road from you. Do you have a car?" And she told me to get in the car and head down the street 10 minutes from my house, look for the smokers, look for the people gathered outside. It's a radio station, so it's going to have a big satellite on top of it. And you're just going to follow those people in, and you can go to your first meeting. And I remember just thinking, this whole thing is just totally weird. Like, what are these people doing? What are they talking about? I remember them praying, holding hands, thinking, okay, this is a little bit too much, talking about their lives, all the stuff going on. I got some information about some of the methods they had tried. And so I'm taking mental note. Well, maybe I need to go out and try some of those methods they have tried, because I was not fully convinced that I was an alcoholic. And that's why I had a 9-year stint. I am not condoning walking into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and needing to go back out and relapse and research, but that's my story. That I walked in and there was something wrong with the way that I drank, but I didn't want enough to do much about it. And so I didn't have an experience of permanent sobriety or recovery from alcoholism until I decided to get serious about it. The consequences of my drinking were never particularly exciting as far as legal consequences, DUIs, even though I did drive drunk hundreds of times. One of my favorite techniques to control my drinking was, I'm going to drive down to Denver from Boulder, which is about a 30-minute drive down a highway, going 75 miles an hour. And if I go down there, then surely I'll be able to control that drinking while I'm in Denver. I'm going to have to get out of there going down one-way streets and stuff and get myself back up to Boulder. That did not deter me. I would get good and drunk, not being able to control the amount that I took, drive the wrong way on one-way streets until friends would come running out of the bar to stop me and get me going back up to Boulder. There were not consequences like DUIs for me. And I often give credit for this higher power bubble that somehow protected me, much like I believe my higher power protects me in recovery and sobriety. When I'm tempted as I recoil as if from a hot flame, I feel like I had a similar type of protection. Again, not condoning drunk driving, but there had to have been something looking out for me. All of those nights running out of the bars by myself when I'd get irritated at people, or people say you need to control your drinking or say the wrong thing. I just go wandering off by myself in the middle of the night, or leave parties, have parties at my place, and people from all over come into my house. So that first meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous, 23, approximately 96, was my first exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm very grateful for that. I had to go and do a lot more experimenting. There's this thing that happens for me, and it was really important when I first got sober this round. My first sponsor had me look at that line in We Agnostics, because I kept making all of these comparisons. Like, I didn't drink the fifth of vodka, or I didn't have booze under my pillow, or I didn't drink 24/7, 365, so I couldn't be an alcoholic. And she read to me this line from We Agnostics: if, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if, when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. And when she had me honestly look at my story, it was like, that's my problem. I put it down for good and for all. I have these talks with myself in the mirror. I'm a teacher. By this point, I'm a teacher, high school biology, trying to get up in the mornings at about 5 o'clock from wherever I am and trying to get to school to teach. I love teaching. But I'd wake up in the mornings and be like, you got to stop. This has got to stop for good and for all. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. You're never doing this again. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of morning cheerleading sessions I had with myself in the mirror. And then by later on that day, it was like, oh, you were making too big of a deal out of it. This is how it's going to work today. So you're not going to start drinking until this time. You're going to have a drink of water in between each alcoholic drink. You're only going to drink Coors Light because that's practically 90% water anyway. Only drink clear alcohols like vodka because that doesn't really count. It looks like water. I mean, these are the things going on in my mind. But first thing in the morning, hundreds of times, I'm stopping for good and for all. And the problem with my mind is I cannot stay stopped on my own. I will, for a variety of reasons, this mind, still today, there's this seed. Great obsession of every abnormal drinker is that one day I will drink like my fellows. That is still implanted in here. But because I have a program of recovery, it stays arrested for today. But that problem, that worm, would rear its ugly head, and I would have to take a drink to get this to shut down. And so I put this first drink in my body, and I'm going to control it. I'm only going to have one. I'm going to go to this expensive wine bar where at least the glasses are big, but they're super expensive. So I know I'm only going to have one glass of wine, and I'm all dressed up and going out with the right person. And then 2 a.m., I'm at Sundown Saloon downstairs drinking shots that are on fire. And I can't figure out how I got from the promise that I'm only going to have the one drink, or the promise that I'm not going to drink, to I can't stay stopped and I can't control the amount I take. I'm really grateful for amazing sponsorship and home groups that talk about this phenomenon of craving that I was experiencing and that mental obsession that preceded the first drink. And then I get to hear lots and lots of different alcoholics tell me their story and identify with how that works. I really do want to talk about my recovery experience. It seems like I often don't get sober soon enough in my talks, and it's like, dang it, I didn't get to tell about these 18 years that I've been blessed with and the years previous. I know there are probably other people on here that have succumbed to the desire, to the urge, the mental obsession of that first drink, and have had to come back in, crawling in on our faces to get sober again. And that is not an excellent experience. Each time I've walked back into the rooms, it has been harder and harder to gain tread and to continue putting one foot in front of the other to get 24 hours put together. The difference this time was I was done with Michelle options, and I put recovery from alcoholism at the absolute top of my priority list, and that's where it has stayed. So recovery's here, and all of the things that my sponsors, home group, service commitments create, this structure, this scaffolding around which I get to put and gain the other opportunities in my life. And magically, somehow my higher power has made it possible to lead a very busy life as long as this stays here, as the recovery is the number one priority. Showing up for commitments, saying yes when I can, being available when sponsees call, and so forth. So walked back in, like I said, on January 5th of 2006. And my first sponsor, who ended up being my sponsor, I will not name her since we're being recorded. She said, I always say she held me hostage in her truck. And she asked me a couple of questions. She said, I've watched you just kind of doing the revolving door, kind of like the convenience, very particular picky eating buffet version of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, when is that first drink that you always seem to experiment with? When is that first drink going to be the last first drink that you get to take? It is going to pull you down, pull you away from Alcoholics Anonymous, and eventually kill you from alcoholism. And I just sat there. I think I was kind of like a cartoon character with my jaw just dropped to the floor, tongue lolling out, and absolutely dumbfounded with nothing in response. When she asked that question, I didn't know how to answer, because I knew the correct answer was, that time is going to come again. I now today know in my first step, that's the only thing I learned in my first step, is that I'm an alcoholic and I can't stay stopped from alcohol. And once I put it in my body, I can't control it. So my first step tells me I'm going to pick up a drink of alcohol and it's eventually going to kill me, unless followed by these other steps that I just didn't really have time for. Like, don't you know who I am? And I'm pretty busy and I'm just not feeling it, or I've got something else fun to do and I'm pretty young and still kind of cute. Very first meeting I went to, I was like, I'm just too cute for this. And I'm really glad that I'm 50 now and I just don't feel like I'm too cute for very much. So that's out of the way. But she asked me that question and I had no answer. And then she read the if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. And I'm like, yeah, I can't stay stopped. And once I put alcohol in my body, I don't know what's going to happen. And I was truly at that point terrified of what the rest of my life could look like, and really didn't know if I should give it a go again. Like, should I get a sponsor? Should I get a home group? Should I do the service commitment? Because I'm an alcoholic and I'm going to drink again. And she said, well, if you want to have a new way of living, show up at my house on Sunday afternoon at 4:00. And every Sunday at 4:00, we opened up the book, followed the directions, and little by slowly, I had this experience that the previous 9 years I'd been missing out on. I don't know where I was going. It was the same people I was still around. So it was like magically all of the Alcoholics Anonymous members got brilliantly smart, and suddenly I was hearing recovery. I was hearing of people that were doing this solution. I got opportunities to go to conferences where we went through the big book, and I heard the same message, whereas before, that window had not been cracked open. But weekly, on Sunday afternoons at 4:00, this gal and I would open the book and follow the instructions. And I started to develop my own relationship with a power greater than myself that doesn't sound identical to anyone else, but also has a lot of similarities to all of the other members that have done the steps. I think writing a complete, fearless, thorough moral inventory, reading that out loud with a higher power as my witness, getting clear about character defects, and then making thorough amends has been the kicker this time. I would keep, and I'm actually hearing a fifth step in a couple of Saturdays. And we just read that this morning about wanting to keep just a couple of things to ourselves and never telling the whole real story. And I got this sneaking suspicion that if I wanted to keep doing the same revolving door and finding myself drunk and not being able to explain why, I might as well just keep doing the same thing I'd been doing, which was keeping a few things to myself and just conveniently not being able to find certain people to make amends. This time, through a series of working the steps a few times, I have gotten the opportunity to truly do a resentment inventory, the way it's laid out in the book, a fear inventory, the way that it's laid out in the book, and a sex and conduct relationship inventory, the way that it's laid out in the book. Fifth step that with someone. Hear their input, pray about it, get clear about these character defects, and make thorough amends at my inconvenience, but the convenience of others, and have this transformative experience. I'm going to mention what has happened every time I've gone to make amends. I believe that it says 9 out of 10 times the unexpected happens. I think it's 10 out of 10. Because the times that I think, oh, this is going to be an easy one. This person's going to congratulate me, practically give me a medal for being sober and living a new life. That's the person that throws me out of their office. And it's like, I'm done with you. I've had enough of your BS. And then those that I'm like, oh, I could never face this person. And then I have this experience that is amazing. Those are the ones where I really get feedback and a transformative experience. So here's what's happened to me. And this is why I really like speaker and then discussion after. So I do the part I'm an alcoholic and a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Here are the harms I believe I have caused you. Go on about that. I regret these actions and ask for your forgiveness. I share my appreciation. I've always been sponsored that I took and took and took. I take and take and take for so much of my time. And then I get this opportunity to give back. And then I conduct myself in a new way. So I'm setting a contract. I'm amending my behavior as we do the Constitution. It takes a lot of work, a lot of voting process, but me and my higher power are contracting to conduct me in a different way. And for the first time, I believe I can do it. I used to say these sorries to people. They'd call me in the middle of the night, or they'd call me the next morning and they'd say, "You want to hear what you did last night?" Not really, but you're going to tell me. And I do these mumblings of "I'm sorry" with this sinking feeling in my heart and my stomach that I was apologizing, and I felt remorseful. I might feel ashamed, but I knew I'd probably do it again. The difference today when I make 9-step amends, I've got this power greater than myself that's there sitting with me. And when I say, this is how I believe I'm going to be able to conduct myself differently with you from here on out, I believe myself, and they usually believe me too. But here's the part of the amend that is so good for me. This is how I believe I have harmed you, but I don't know how it felt for you. I'm now willing to hear anything you'd like to add about this or anything else. And I was told, because I have the gift of the gab, to literally hold my mouth closed while I wait for what this other person wants to say. So I have this opportunity for the person to whom I'm making amends. I'm getting an opportunity to listen to the experience that this person has had being in relationship with me. And I can't tell you how many surprising, almost entirely different experiences of me and the places we went together that another person might have. The way that they recollect an event being entirely different. Or that's great that you're making amends for those things you just listed, but could I just tell you about 4 or 5 more things that had a way bigger impact on breaking us apart and really affecting negatively our relationship? And I love today, it was hard at first, but I love today to hear that other perspective and get to see how I am a tornado still that roars through the lives of others. And I need an opportunity to hear other people's experience of being in relationship with me and how I can make it right according to them, rather than thinking I know how we're going to make this right. And that translates into my service commitments. It translates into participating as a member of my home group when I'm at the business meeting and I think I know what we need to do, and I have an agenda item that I think is super important, until the group's conscience is expressed and something entirely different than Michelle's idea comes to be. And I get this opportunity to grow up and go along with the majority vote, be a part of the substantial unanimity to do something different than the way I thought it should be done. Part of what I wanted to share tonight is something that has come up a few times, not terribly recently, but a little bit, is being in recovery and doing recovery with others, in fellowship with others. Do you need something, Annalise? Okay. My 10-year-old just came in here. I'm using her playroom, sunroom to do this. So, but what is really important to me is this fellowship that has grown around me, and then the common experiences that I never thought would be useful in recovery. That ninth step promise of we will see how our experiences can benefit others. I've gotten to experience being very single in Alcoholics Anonymous and thinking, okay, that sex and relationship inventory was kind of for naught because I'll never get to use any of the stuff I learned, to meeting the love of my life, reconnecting with somebody I graduated from high school with, and us starting a family, thinking we're going to have this big old family of kids running around everywhere, and getting to experience pregnancy loss, multiple pregnancy losses, and then getting to be pregnant as a 39-year-old, a geriatric pregnancy with my daughter, and getting to do that in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and magically meeting other members who have had all of these same experiences. And this idea of terminal uniqueness, getting to be blasted out of the water when I'm really talking about what's going on, when I'm really staying current on my 10th and 11th step, when I'm working closely in the steps with others, being an active member of my home group, going to the fellowship nights, going to our night watch commitment monthly. When I'm showing up and I'm in the middle, I can't hide. And I'm a runner and I'm a hider. But when I stay active and stay in and make myself available, all of these experiences I get to do in Technicolor in front of everyone else, and we get to share those experiences to recover together. And I'm saying it pretty straight-faced and not super emotionally, but I have to say that that's the part of being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous that has saved my life. Getting to show up and be wholly there, having selfishness, resentment, dishonesty, and fear crop up, and really using that paragraph where it says, we ask God at once to remove it. We talk to someone immediately. So I had this mistaken idea when I used to get sobered up that I had to really kind of get it together. I've always admired people that just come roaring in 2 hours after their last drink still shaking, because I would sober up at home and gussy myself up and dress myself up and do my makeup and hair and go into my first meeting. And I have a tendency to do that spiritually as well. But I have found that when I call or meet with someone right away when I'm doing the bad cry and I'm like, my life is over, I've got this thing, it's the first justifiable resentment. You're going to hear it, and we're going to concur that this is the first ever defended resentment that does not need to be rectified. There's no amends that are going to be needed. When I come in as is and do this stuff in real time, that's where the magic happens. When ladies show up at my house and sit down across the table from me, and I ask them how they're doing, and they say, I'm not doing very well tonight. But we get busy reading the book, and I mean, it's magical. It's like, I don't know what the solution is, but where did we leave off in the book? Every single time, the paragraph, the page that we turn to and start reading, it's like, it's the answer right there. So showing up in real time to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous right here, right now, just as I am, that's been the best. And I'll be happy to send you an email after the meeting. I just saw it in the chat. And I'm also happy to talk to anybody. I'm happy to give out my number. I don't know how this works right after the meeting, but I am always willing to talk to anybody, anywhere, that would like to talk about recovery, sponsorship, questions. You're new, you've never been to a meeting before, and who's this lady yapping on the screen? Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous if you're new, because you're in for the ride of your life. And truly, I think the best information I ever heard, and it took a while to sink in, was that I never had to drink again. And I totally didn't believe them, because I'm like, I absolutely have to drink. That's the only way I can get my brain to shut up. But you don't have to drink again, and there is a solution in these rooms, and it is outlined in this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And our co-founders, I mean, it is just incredible to me. I'm reading the forward to the second edition with one of my gals, and I'm just floored at how, Bill comes in December of 34, meets Bob in June of 35, and then they're roaring off to the hospital and just picking up people and sobering up and recovering from alcoholism with no book. Like, they didn't have the book to use as a crutch. Like, let's turn to page 60 and see what it says. I love that it does not take all that long for us to have a spiritual awakening, and as the result of these steps, and have something to offer the next person. The last part I'd like to talk about before I shut this sucker down is how service has really rounded out and transformed my recovery. Having a 3 legacy sponsor has not hurt, so I don't have to have a service sponsor here and work the steps with another person here. I have a woman that has been a beautiful example of how we do recovery, service, and unity. She shows up for her home group, and I follow suit with my home group. I have a new service commitment that was I just rotated on as District 12 out of Colorado. So Colorado Area 10, I was DCM for 2 years. And that was such a beautiful experience. So basically the gist of that, for those who have not heard of DCM, is I got to be a shepherd of sorts and help those who were coming in as GSR, representing their home groups, figure out how to take this information up and down the triangle from GSO to the area, our regional events, our district, and then most importantly, our home groups and its members. And that was such an honor to get to sit with and have conversations with all of the folks in the district. I've rotated on from that as of December 31st and got elected in as my business meeting chair for the year of 2024. And I was really reluctant to stand for a home group position, because remember, I told you I like to run. So I like to have options. And when I got nominated to stand as business chair, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I am available and I am willing. Those are 2 things that for so many years I wanted to be available and I wanted to be willing, but stuff just got in the way. My drinking got in the way. Being at the wrong place at the wrong time, or missing cues to get where I needed to be. It's so cool that I was able to say, willing, available, not too sure, but God doesn't care. The group's conscience does, though, and I'm now getting to help coordinate the business meetings monthly, and that's been such a growing experience. We co-bid for one of our elections assemblies that's coming up this coming November, and I am just so excited to have people from all over Colorado get to serve in different volunteer opportunities and just be humbled by whatever it is that God has in store for that particular voting assembly. Trying to think if there's anything else. I think all I'm going to do is I'm just going to make one last plug for welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous if you're new. Welcome into the rooms if you're struggling and aren't necessarily new. I totally bank on the continued renewal of various spiritual experiences and awakenings that I don't even know are right in my face. Like a new woman that asked me to take her through the steps, or a new person that has a concept study that they asked me to participate in. Say yes to the new opportunities, the new experiences, talk to others, get numbers. I get bored sometimes in AA, and I have to really pray about that and ask, what am I doing about that? Or nobody's texting or calling me. Nobody's reaching out to me. And usually if I say that out loud to anybody, they'll be like, oh, so how's your reaching out and you're connecting with others? Someone right before the meeting was talking about going through and just reaching out to folks on the phone list. I love how we have the chance to redirect, to get back in an instant by connecting with each other. It is because of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that I am alive today, because it has been you all, the members who are doing this alongside us, all of us walking together, trudging the road of happy destiny, doing our deal. It has been witnessing others as we walk that I get to see how we get to do this together. And it has been such a great honor, one that I never thought I would say I was grateful for. But to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is the greatest honor so far in my lifetime that I have gotten to be. So with that, I am going to be quiet, and I know it's not the whole hour, but my higher power is saying that's all you got to say.